I have got Penn State beating West Virginia by double digits on Saturday. But what if they don't?
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth, which I think we can call officially back right now. Not like Texas football back, but like back. This episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy, which fixes tired fast. Zero sugar, convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. Go to 5hourenergy.com. Use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order. Cannot be used with other promotions. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. We'll talk Georgia, Clemson. We'll talk, yes, the other game taking place tonight, or one of few, I should say, TCU and Stanford. Is TCU the most underrated team in the Big 12? We're going to answer that question later on today's show. But Mountaineer Paul, our newest host here at the network, host of Locked On West Virginia Mountaineers, joining me on the show, probably to tell me that I am a fool for picking Penn State. We may very well disagree over the next 8 to 10 minutes, but that's why this is so much fun. So I love Penn State's offseason. I think the offensive coordinator change is great. I love where they brought in a defensive coordinator. You've got your quarterback back in Drew Aller. I like Penn State's roster a lot. I think they're going 11-1 this year. I think they are winning this game. I think they are covering the 8.5-point spread, Paul. What would it look like if I'm wrong?
Well, number one, they don't even have a right tackle named yet. That's still a battle that's going on. Wormley's back at center. He's a good player. But it's really a brand new offensive line. They lost 3 guys to the NFL draft. I think that's going to be something to watch because there's so much going on with the Kotelnicki offense. There could be some miscommunication. There could be some mistakes. Give some extra chances to a West Virginia in a game like this where, look, there's probably going to be in the 50s or 60s in total plays in this game. So we're talking about 5 to 6 drives per team. This is going to be a low-scoring game, in my opinion, based off of those, just both teams from last year. They love to run the ball. And then where's the skill talent for Penn State? That's really what I want to know. Trey Wallace has been often injured in his career at Penn State. They need him to be the number 1 receiver. They bring in Julian Fleming from Ohio State. He's got 70 catches over a 4-year career. That's your number 2 receiver. And then Amari Evans, a true freshman, pushed him all through camp. That's supposed to be the guy that was your savior coming in. So I think you lose Keandre Lambert-Smith to Auburn. He was the guy that damaged West Virginia the most last year. Tyler Warren is definitely a reliable tight end. They're going to need him. Singleton and Allen were held in check under 150 yards together last year. And so if it's going to happen, I think it's going to be a combination of there's no skill talent for West Virginia. West Virginia is upgraded at corner with Hollis, who is a projected mid-round draft pick, and the kid they brought in from Duquesne on the other side, who was also being projected into the later rounds. They really went hard after these corners because Beanie Bishop came in and was an All-American last year. They could sell that to these guys in the portal from Minnesota. He was Minnesota's 3rd corner, came in, became an All-American. They did the same thing with the guy named Charles Woods the year before that. So they really had a good run bringing in corners. So I think it's going to be the combination of Penn State's offense being a little bit more non-existent than people think, especially with not 1, not 2, with 3 new coordinators on that team.
When you look at the offensive line for Penn State, that was where you went first when I said, well, what does it look like if West Virginia wins? How confident are you in the Mountaineers' front 4 to cause havoc and pressure Drew Aller the way that, a Michigan or an Ohio State maybe did more so than other teams last year and held him in check better than a lot of other teams did, including West Virginia?
West Virginia led the Big 12 in sacks last year, and they had led the league in tackles for loss. Their pass rush comes from the bandit spot. They run a 3-4 defense, so they really pass rush from the linebacker spot more so than the front 4. Our front 4 are more like they eat up blocks. These are big guys, 270s, 280s, like Sean Martin, 6'5", 270. So although he can pass rush, these are guys that are really similar to offensive linemen for defense, that they just kind of eat up blocks and let the linebackers work around them, fill gaps, and pass rush off the edge. They also bring a lot of different blitz packages from the safeties and corners as well. So I think that's what it's going to look like a little bit more, which is why when Zach tried to say that the Seiko from Locked On Penn State tried to say that West Virginia's defensive ends were last in the league in pass rush efficiency rate, he was right. But that's because we pass rush with the linebackers instead. And so that's what we had 44 sacks, 84 tackles for loss last year, I believe it was.
What is the one thing that you think West Virginia has to do offensively in this game with Garrett Green at quarterback, or it could be the ground game, if they're going to pull the upset here of a preseason top 10 team in Penn State? And we've already seen an even bigger favorite in Florida State go down over in Ireland. It's not that it's impossible. I just really, really like Penn State's team. They won this game by over 20 points last year, and I think West Virginia is capable of having a solid season. I just don't think they have closed that gap enough because Penn State has done a really good job. That's why I'm really confident in the Nittany Lions here. But when you look at West Virginia's offense, Paul, what do they have to do to win this football game?
Garrett Green, we need to see the maturation of Garrett Green develop from, okay, you can throw against zone coverage. That's one thing. What can you do against man coverage? And can you resist the urge to run when the play breaks down just even a little bit, even though that's one of his biggest gifts, and maybe we need him to run in this game. But I want to see the development of Garrett Green immediately. Obviously, people bring up the 53% passing completion, even though they leave alone the Drew Aller 59 completion percentage. I just want to throw that out there too. But obviously, he has a jump to make. And from 53, I think he needs to get to the 60s. But Garrett Green needs to have an impact on this game. That's just what it's going to look like. Garrett Green, if we win this game, his thumbprints will be all over it. And I think we're going to need to be able to control the clock and run the ball. And we ran for 150 against them last year with no passing attack. 2 of the 3 starting wide receivers weren't even on the team for the game last year in 3 weeks. And they had to run with 3 freshmen the rest of the year. So those guys have all worked an entire offseason together. And one last thing, Cole Taylor, who matched the production of Tyler Warren last year, is back, a 6'7" tight end in the middle of the field. He had 44 catches, 4 touchdowns last year, and he's Garrett Green's roommate. So I think there are things you can look to and say, okay, that could work.
When you look at this game, West Virginia being at home, what is your confidence interval that the Mountaineers can ride that Morgantown home crowd to an upset victory here? Because I said I've got Penn State by double digits, and
yeah,
the floor is yours, my friend.
What's crazy is I have never I'm talking the last couple of years versus Pitt, Alabama, the LSU build-up from 2011. This is really the biggest build to a game ever, and I think it's because of Pat McAfee. I think him being involved and then him fueling this fire from
schools are closing. Schools are closing for this game, which by the way,
Kelly is here.
That should be a standard for success to determine whether a school is properly hyped up its fan base to an excitement level for a season or hyped up a particular game. Do you have schools closing because traffic is going to be too bad?
And not only that, they've got a jet flyover. Coke is involved. They're handing out rally towels. Machine Gun Kelly is performing at halftime, and Megan Fox is going to be there. So come on. That's got to be a reason to shut it down just for her.
Last thing for you here, Paul, your final score prediction on Saturday, big noon kickoff, Gus Johnson, Joel Klatt, Jenny Taft on the call. Do you think West Virginia gets this upset?
I do. And I really thought long and hard about it. I picked Penn State last year. I didn't think we had closed the gap anywhere. I didn't even think we were going to be that good last year, to be honest. I picked us to win 7 games, and we won 9. So, we outperformed my expectations last year. Now I have a little bit better of a temperature on this team. And I've got West Virginia not winning on a walk-off 33-30. The goalposts will be gone. If that
The goalposts are gone. First prediction. Mountaineer Paul, host of Locked On West Virginia. Go check him out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Paul, enjoy the chat, my man. Enjoy the game on Saturday.
Thank you.
Georgia is so ready to take on the season, as ready as anybody really can be with Carson Beck. Are they steamrolling Clemson? I believe so. That's coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by Factor. Fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. They have 35 different meals, more than 60 add-ons as well. There's tons of variety. Everyone will be able to find something that you like because there's always new flavors to explore. Head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's 2 different ways to save. Code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Go check out Factor Meals today. And once you do that, check out eBay Motors, because passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. I think Georgia can steamroll Clemson. I don't think Clemson's a bad football team. They've got my favorite trio. So does Georgia, by the way. Head coach, quarterback, offensive coordinator. Dabo Swinney, Cade Klubnik, Garrett Riley. On the other side, Kirby Smart, Carson Beck, Mike Bobo. Which of those 3 have proven to be more prolific in their college careers together so far? Yeah, that would be Georgia. No surprise there. I think Carson Beck is the best quarterback in the country. I think he could be the first quarterback taken off the board in the 2025 NFL draft. I'm a big Carson Beck fan. And so when I look at what Georgia brings to the table here, yes, they are admittedly replacing a lot of new things. There is no Ladd McConkey. There is no Powers. But boy, there's still a lot of talent in there. A couple transfers whose names you might need to know. Colby Young comes in from Miami. London Humphreys comes over from Vanderbilt. And Benjamin Jurasik. I am so excited, interested, maybe is a better word, whatever you like, to see what Benjamin Jurasik is in this Georgia offense, because nobody is Brock Bowers, but there are only a handful of tight ends in all of college football. And from what I've heard and read, Benjamin Jurasik might not be the number 1 tight end in Georgia's room. I'm just telling you, if they want to run some of the same concepts in plays that were seemingly unique to Brock Bowers with a tight end, Benjamin Jurasik can do those sorts of things. He is a crazy good athlete. He was a pretty highly touted recruit coming out of high school. He went to a school in Stanford that is known for producing high-end tight ends. Remember, it's Iowa number 1. It is Stanford number 2. Once upon a time, Stanford was the number 1 tight end producing school in all of college football. You think about Zach Ertz. You think about Colby Fleener, Laverne Toilolo. Like, there have been a lot of great Stanford tight ends that have rolled through Palo Alto in the years. And Benjamin Jurasik was going to be the next one. It's just their rebuild timeline is going to take a little bit longer because they can't use the transfer portal. Well, guys can transfer out of Stanford at will, and Jurasik's found his way to Georgia. So when you talk about Georgia, the biggest question that the Bulldogs have going into this game, how are all of their weapons going to mesh? The reason that I feel confident is I would much rather replace weapons for a quarterback to build chemistry with than I would return weapons and replace a quarterback. Because it's a lot easier for a quarterback to make receivers better and to incorporate them into the offense very smoothly and easily than it is for a quarterback to make his way into the offense, than it is for a quarterback to make the adjustment there. Certainly there's an adjustment. And Georgia's offense in week 1, or maybe even half 1, against what should be a capable Clemson defense, it might not be firing on every single cylinder. But when you give me one of the best teams in the trenches on both sides of the ball, when you give me maybe the best quarterback, the one that I certainly like the most in all of college football, and capable proven weapons that are coming in, I think this is a plug and play situation. I think it is plug and play. And one of the reasons I am so bullishly high on Georgia, and I'm not tired of Georgia, I never got tired of Alabama per se, because I looked at them and thought, wish my team was that. Wish my team was that good. Wish my team recruited at that level. That's what a lot of people say. It's what they think. They just don't necessarily want to admit it. But because they want to be, against the dynasty in the sport, and you do whatever you like. But I think Georgia's winning a national championship. I think they're going to handle Clemson. It could be close for a quarter, maybe a quarter and a half until Georgia finds its footing. But if Georgia finds its footing, not just in this game, but any game throughout the entire season, nobody can touch them. Nobody, not even Ohio State. If you give me a grudge match between Ohio State and Georgia, sure, there's a world where it is fun. But Carson Beck versus Will Howard, there's a gap there. There is a gap. The last time Ohio State and Georgia met a couple of years ago, it was C.J. Stroud against Stetson Bennett. Wasn't much of a gap. And what do you know? It came down to a 50-yard field goal that Ohio State hooked, or the Buckeyes get to throttle TCU in the national championship game. So when I look at this Georgia team, they are the most complete team on paper. They've got the defense, they've got the coach, they've got the quarterback, and perhaps the reason I like them the most, they've got the motivation. I mean, if they'd been in the playoff last year, they could have won. Michigan might have still won the national championship. I think Michigan was at that sort of level. But you seen Georgia play football when they're at their best? When Alabama was at their best, think the last national championship they won in 2020, when their offense was just too good. You looked up and you went, they were just too good. They played, I think it was Notre Dame in the playoff game and beat them pretty soundly. It was a really good Notre Dame team. Guess what? Bama's just better. That's where Georgia's at, with the way they recruit, with how good Kirby Smart is as a head coach. And Mike Bobo's proven to be a good offensive coordinator. Yeah, it wasn't perfect in the SEC championship game. Oh, that's right. He's going up against Nick freaking Saban, who, can I just say as a pundit, is chef's kiss. I have liked him in that analyst chair from the moment he stepped away from college football. I said it here on the show. I thought he'd be utterly fantastic. Having his voice around the sport is great. I'm here for it. I'm here for Bill Belichick being an analyst in the NFL. I'm here for Nick Saban being an analyst in college football. Now, how does Clemson keep this close? And one reason that I'm confident in Georgia is this right here. The way that Clemson keeps this game close is if they get out of Cade Klubnik what they have not consistently seen from him on the field. The problem is you're going to try to do that against Georgia, and that's, wait for it, really hard. That's going to be really, really hard to do. And so you have to find quarterback play that takes care of the football and is efficient and productive. You don't need to go crazy and be unbelievable. This Clemson roster is not the least equipped to go up against Georgia. 24/7 Sports has it as one of the 5 best in their talent composite rankings in the entire country. Still a gap. Vegas is still favoring Georgia by 2 touchdowns here for a reason. And when you have a quarterback that's turnover prone, Kirby Smart can eat you alive. I have seen this a lot. We could be seeing it again. Or maybe Garrett Riley and the Tigers have got the adjustment. Maybe the weapons that they have are in fact good enough to beat the Georgia secondary. Maybe the trench play is there. But I think it comes down to the quarterback. If you get Cade Klubnik rattled early, we've seen Kirby Smart do this to a lot of quarterbacks over the years. It'll look like Drew Aller against Ohio State. It'll look like Bo Nix a couple of years ago against Georgia, where you go, oh, hey, he's got – nope. That's just Kirby Smart being better. So have to get Cade Klubnik to play his best and take care of the football. You get a couple turnovers in there, bye-bye. Bye-bye. Good night. Nice to see you. But I am excited to watch this game. Let's go back over to the Big 12. Is TCU the most underrated team over there? They might be. That's coming up next. If you're tired after lunch, you're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5-hour energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing hard right into it. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it is the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done, which is great for someone like me who has a lot to do this time of year. Shows, play-by-play, all sorts of other work. The 5-Hour Energy website has flavors galore as well. Watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There's a flavor for everyone, and you can go try them all. Put together your own 12-pack or your own 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it is delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get some 5-Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order, cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. 5-Hour Energy, that's the place to go. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Is TCU the most underrated team in the Big 12? Here to talk about that, Stephen Simcox, Locked On TCU, who also posted an absolute dunking on Jim Harbaugh on Twitter the other day, which I have to say, Stephen, was quite hilarious with the Max Duggan reference. But I think that for TCU, I like the defensive coordinator move. We'll see what Josh Hoover is at the quarterback position, but they start with Stanford this week. Going into this year, there are a lot of teams that can win the Big 12. Is TCU being unfairly left out of that conference title conversation?
Man, it's a great question. Last offseason, Spencer, I spent a lot of time defending Sonny Dykes, defending TCU, because I felt like they were really undervalued coming off an appearance in the national championship game. Of course, that game didn't go to plan, but they did win the playoff game against Michigan. And they sort of fell on their face. So I feel like the underrated aspect of this year is pretty valid. But I think they're in a situation that a lot of Big 12 teams are, with the departure of Texas and Oklahoma. And, of course, Utah's coming into the league. Kansas State's been very consistent. But bottom line is, Spencer, I feel like everybody sort of thinks, well, hey, if a few things break right for us, we're probably going to be in a lot of competitive games, then we can be there in Arlington. I feel like from a skill position standpoint, TCU is as talented as anybody in the league. Josh Hoover, you mentioned, he's coming back kind of like year 1.5. He spent the back half of the season playing for the Frogs. They're really, I feel like, loaded at wide receiver. Savion Williams returns. They brought in Eric McAllister from Boise State. Also excited about a guy, Dalen Wright, who transferred in from Minnesota last offseason and dealt with some injuries last year. The real question for me is just how can they hold up in the trenches? And obviously that's a huge deal. Like, you can't really scheme around getting beat up front. They dealt with those issues last year. I think their starting 5 offensive linemen are solid. If they have any injuries, then the depth there is really questionable. So that could be a problem. And then how quickly do you get adjusted to Andy Avalos's defense? It's very different. They're going to bring a lot of pressure, do a lot of, disguising coverages, throwing different looks at offenses, which is super exciting. But that also means you as a defense have to understand your responsibilities. And so if they can get through some early growing pains and sort of, as the year goes on, get more comfortable with it, then I definitely think this is a group that can threaten for a Big 12 championship. And I don't really feel like there's a team in the league that's just head and shoulders above anybody else. And TCU has shown that they can, have the talent and the coaching staff to run off a bunch of wins like they did in 2022.
They start with a Friday night game against Stanford, which is probably one of the more random non-conference matchups of the college football slate in week 1, but that is a Power 4 matchup, a classic Big 12 ACC non-conference matchup, of course. I speak from experience here, Stephen. When you go to the Farm, strange things can happen when Stanford is not a great team. You look at some of the teams that they have hung around with or beaten over the last several years as their program has been at the bottom of the conference. It does not make a lot of sense. They almost beat Arizona at home last year. A couple of years ago, they almost beat a very good Oregon State team that went 10-3. They did beat Oregon in 2021. Like, they've had those matchups where it's just strange. And I think part of it is that there's not much of an environment out there when Stanford is not good. So you're not going to have a highly attended game. You're not going to have a ruckus crowd, and it can throw off the momentum and mojo for a team. It's got to be BYOE at some level. Bring your own energy. So going into this game against Stanford, what do you want to see from TCU? What can they showcase and prove against a Cardinal team that I think is going to be a little bit better than people think in year 2 under Troy Taylor out there? But what do you want to see from TCU in this game?
I think mentality is a huge part of it. I mean, last year they got upended by Colorado to begin the season, and Sonny said after the game, he was like, well, I just don't feel like we were super excited to play, which is pretty dumbfounding to me. And at times last year, they just dealt with that issue. Didn't look like they were super prepared. Didn't seem like they were focused. And so they've talked a lot this offseason about accountability. Well, now you have a chance to prove it. As you said, probably kind of a sleepy environment. That classic 9:30 p.m. Central Time ACC kickoff that we're getting on a Friday night. You're going to have to bring it. You have to be locked in and from the jump really take control. And really over Sonny's tenure, that's something that they haven't done super consistently. So that's one thing. I think also like this offense put up good numbers last year, but they struggled to be efficient. They were bad in the red zone. They were bad at extending drives at times. Stanford's defense, at least from a stats perspective, last year was abysmal. And I know they're banking on like continuity, year two, getting better, but they didn't bring in a ton of transfers. So if this is
Stanford
a good
doesn't do transfers.
Yeah, they don't
They have the
transfers.
129th ranked transfer portal class. They've only brought in 4 guys total. They had 14 depart. I don't think all 14 of those guys were impact players per se. It's part of the reason I think Stanford could be okay is they do have some continuity from last year's team. But yeah, this is not a dramatically different team from last year.
Right. And so I think if this offense is good, which Sonny Dykes, that's been his, consistent theme through his career. He took a risk by bringing in Kendall Briles last year. Then this is a game where you should put up a lot of points, kind of set the tone. And so that's really my 2 things that I'm looking most forward to. I expect the defense to have, some issues, but I want to see more physicality. Like Andy Avalos said, we've been working a lot. Like it's a tackle football game. We've been working a ton on tackling, just kind of fundamentals, being able to stop the run. So can you do those fundamental things well? And then the scheme should come over time. Those are the things I'd love to see from TCU this week.
On the Stanford side of things, Ashton Daniels was present at ACC Media Days. You'd expect him to be the starter. He showed some promise last year, had some good games against Colorado on the road, most notably in a Friday night upset of the Buffs in which they trailed. I think it was 26-0 at one point, and they came all the way back to win the football game. You might see some Justin Lamson. You might see the true freshman 4-star Elijah Brown from Mater Dei High School. I think Troy Taylor has said that they might, or not Troy Taylor specifically, but beat writers that cover Stanford has said you might see all 3 quarterbacks in this game. That might lend itself towards, well, TCU is going to be rolling a whole heck of a lot more, but they're working in a newer quarterback in Josh Hoover going into this year. The number, according to our friends at FanDuel, is TCU minus 9.5. I think they're justified in being favored here, but week 1 at the Farm, Stanford, I think, is a little bit better than people think. I think the Cardinal cover that number. I like TCU to win the game, but I'll take them 27-20, and Stanford gets a cover there on the 9.5.
Yeah, that surprise factor with the quarterbacks will be interesting to watch. Can they catch them off guard, especially with some of those wildcat formations that they like to throw out there? And then also something to watch here, Elike Omenar, the big wide receiver for Stanford, had a huge year, big game against Travis Hunter in Colorado. TCU's kind of banged up at corner. Avery Helm, who they projected to start, he went down with an ACL injury, knee injury. They didn't get that specific with it, but a knee injury that's probably going to be a season ender. Vernon Glover, another guy they counted on for depth. So they got 2 transfers starting at corner. One of them is JT Broughton, who comes over from Utah. He's got a lot of experience. Bottom line, they got to find a way to guard that guy, and that's going to be a challenge. They're looking to play more press man coverage this year with Andy Avalos. But ultimately, I think TCU covers. I agree with you. I think Stanford's better, and I feel like in the first half, this could be a close ball game. But if TCU is going to be a contender in the Big 12, even with all the wackiness of week 1, I feel like in the second half, with the athletes they have, the speed on the outside, they should start to pull away, force some turnovers potentially. And I'll take them to win 35-24. So not a crazy cover there, but they get it done and get a 2-score win over the Cardinals to start the season.
Stephen Simcox, Locked on TCU. Stephen, appreciate the time.
Thank you, Spencer.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.